All right, let's go ahead and get started. Just pulling up my notes. All right. So I wanted to first identify a note taker for this meeting. I think everyone has we've done the rounds. Dick, we might be back at you.
Fair enough.
All right. So Dick will be the note taker. And then I wanted to go on to, actually, let's just do the roll call. All right. So Cliff,
Here.
Jeff,
Here.
Mariah,
Here.
Dick.
Here.
All right. And I am here as well. All right. So the first item on the agenda is to review the minutes. There was a late update to the minutes from the 3rd that was sent out because the latest version with my the timeline in there wasn't in there originally, so I'm not sure if people had an opportunity to see that. That was maybe an hour and a half ago. Um,
It was the same timeline you sent. It just got rolled into the minutes, just so
but
people know. That's
yeah,
the only difference.
that's right. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had sent it earlier to Nicole, not realizing she couldn't get into the Google Docs, so
Yeah, no problem. All right, so let's start with the first one on from the 27th. This was the minutes that Jeff had drafted from a couple of weeks ago. Any questions or updates to the minutes?
No.
All right, any motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
All right, I second. Let's go around the room. Mariah,
yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Cliff,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. And then the second set of minutes from November 3rd. Any questions on these or updates? All right.
Actually, I'm sorry. I just caught one thing in the October 27th meeting that I would just like to point out, which is on the Metco section. It says he added that between Metco and materials fee, the cost to the town is roughly $4 million. And I think we still are going to talk about that. So I'm not sure that that line is, I'm not sure that the committee completely agrees on that and that the line's accurate yet. So if it's
But
something about, I don't know, like the average, I don't know, there's just, it's not quite, and as we'll talk about more, like I don't think it's the right way to frame it.
So maybe those can be amended to say that Dick has estimated that that's the cost.
I stated, based on the DESI numbers. I I
On
can,
the average, right, based on the average numbers, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
His
Uh,
estimate of the cost to the town is roughly $4 million, I think would be better. Rather than just saying it is, it's like his estimate of is okay with me.
And that's for the special education specifically, correct?
that
yeah,
is,
yeah.
I mean, let me make clear that was not my estimate. It was not an estimate, and it was the I mean, you can put in the total cost based on based on the DESI number, average DESI numbers is 4 million.
That's
In
fine.
20
Yes, that's fine. I'm comfortable with that. Just based on the average numbers.
That's fine. So Jeff, do you want to make that update?
Yes, I will make that update. And then what's the protocol? Do I bring it back here next week?
No, we're voting it with that change, and so it just gets published with that change.
Oh, all
Yeah.
right. Well, that's easy.
So do we need to revote then?
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's fine. I think that change makes sense. All right. Um, and then sorry, we were talking about the 11:3 minutes.
Move to
Now,
approve.
yeah, move to approve. All right, thank you. I had to get my bearings again. Did somebody second?
I'll second.
All right, great. So let's just vote Mariah,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Cliff,
Yep.
Dick,
Yeah,
and I also vote yes. So
I just
those,
want to say, for at least that meeting, the AI summary that comes out of Zoom was not only bad, it was literally opposite and wrong.
I have
So
found that pretty
just
consistently.
saying, yeah.
No, I found that consistently, and I actually don't use the AI summary for that reason. Like there are things that it puts in there, but I'm like, this is it's not accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that the what what I have found useful is not the AI summary, but the transcription along the right
Yes.
side.
Yeah. Agreed.
You
Yes.
know, not always sensible, doesn't always get things correct, but it at least provides a quick way of going through and making sure you haven't missed anything. And that has been available with the recording in the past. So
Great. Yes, and I used that when I did minutes as well for a different meeting, and that was pretty accurate and helpful. So I agree. All right. So I wanted to follow up. The next item on the agenda, and I'm gonna sort of drill into this a little bit differently, is on the progress on the work on the subcommittee. So there's sort of a few different subtopics, I think, related to this. And what we can do is maybe just run through everyone's work and see if people have updates. I did not get anyone to volunteer to present um, during a particular meeting, despite the request of this group to assign a meeting. So I think what we'll need to do is just make sure that people have what they need to complete the work within the timeline.
But I just
Um,
want to clarify, people requested that you assign meetings, not that you ask us to volunteer.
I actually requested that people tell me when they thought was viable, and then I would slate it in there. So thank you for clarifying. Since nobody volunteered, I feel like I have carte blanche to do exactly what I want, and I will now. But I did want to give people an opportunity to volunteer, but I will update things based on that. So I will send out a list after this meeting. All right. Um, so let's go into the also within the agenda, it was just 5A is the list of items that we've been talking about for a while. I just wanted to run through and see if anybody had updates on their areas. So Dick, yours are the first few, healthcare premiums. Um, any update on your?
I no, I have done nothing further on any of mine since
Okay,
our last meeting.
no worries. Okay. All right, great. Jeff, any update on yours?
I do have an update, but I just need 2 seconds to switch from A to B because I just got home. So can we skip
Yeah,
me and come back? Okay, thank you.
we'll go back to you, no problem. Mariah, teaching loads.
Um, you can open that. Remind me, did we talk about teaching loads already last week? I think
Um,
I gave the update last week on that one, right?
so you were trying to reach out to the executive
Oh
director.
yeah, I did not email, right, okay, so I haven't emailed him back again. Let me ping him again now. And I didn't hear from him in the meantime either.
Right. Okay. All right. And then Cliff, analysis of class sizes and classroom usage.
So I do not have any, do not have much of an update. We did get the forecast from the schools last week on what the enrollment is and what they're projecting for next year. It's a fairly simple forecast methodology, just taking an average of the past 3 years of kindergarten enrollment, and that's kindergarten, and then rolling forward each existing class to the next class. And I presume that's based on a specific percentage that they've experienced over the last few years. Although, Mariah, you might be able to confirm that for me. It'd be interesting to get the percentages. I know we've seen that in the past. I think looking back at the information from Cropper, in the last few years. It's been fairly accurate in terms of what they forecasted. They did say that they expect a plus or minus 2% error rate in what they do. So I believe it's well within that margin. And so there's a projected slight decline next year. I don't know how that's going to play out in terms of class allocation, whether or not it will mean that there will be some places where 3 classes might be able to be consolidated into 2. That's sort of unknown because you can't predict where the changes are going to come from, obviously. I'm hoping to get the plans for each building from the building department. It'll probably be in a format that will require someone who has a CAD/CAM program, whether that be David Pollock or Carlos Rodejo or someone, an architect, to be able to then print out specific relevant pages that we can look at and maybe understand the capacity of each individual building, because I think that's a particular goal.
Yeah.
Cliff, are you talking about capacity or utilization?
Well, you have
I
to
thought
start
we were
with
talking about utilization before.
Well, you have to start with capacity first, right? You want to understand what you can do, because otherwise you'll see utilization and people might say, well, why is it such a small number? And that comes into the whole conversation about there are certain classrooms that exist in some buildings that are small. And so people need to understand that impacts capacity and therefore utilization. I think.
Well, I guess maybe I misunderstood because the earlier conversations were about this idea that there were empty classrooms not being used as opposed to a classroom that holds 20 kids versus 22 kids. So staff has already put together these plans of the buildings and are planning to present them at the finance subcommittee on Wednesday to school committee first before they come here. So I guess I'm a little like,
well, that's great, Mariah.
Okay.
That's some of this information is not particularly well distributed. So wonderful. We can then.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I guess, I hope that will be, I hope that's going to answer some of the questions at least, because I had understood that, again, this was going back to that conversation that Sergio had asked about the chart of sections versus building
Yes.
usage, and that misunderstanding that gray meant that there was empty classrooms. So, oops, Jeff is in the waiting room.
Uh-oh.
So I have that and some other updates when it gets to my turn. I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, great. So we can, again, wait for presentations and then go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think like we have lots of data about building capacity already. There's prior, like 2019 and 2018 reports about, plenty of reports about building capacity and sort of the different ways to measure building capacity. So, and there's only one new building since then. So I guess I'm a little surprised that we're thinking we're going back to creating new maps of building capacity, but.
Yeah, so I think, Mariah, the problem is that stuff may be there, okay? And maybe we should just be asking you. But anyone who goes and tries to find it from the public cannot find it. And so the fact that it's not readily available frustrates people. And I guess the recommendation would be have someplace, on the school department website that lets people go and see that information. Because if that information were available, easily available to people, you'd be eliminating lots of questions that people ask over and over again.
But Cliff, like I've been on this committee now for a month or two, and we talked about this question, and I understood the question as being something else. It's new to me that we were talking about, like that you were planning on going to get square footage of buildings from the building department in that way.
Classroom inventory by school,
But
identification.
that's not capacity. Capacity is something different.
Well, okay, yeah, I think you're kind of splitting hairs. To me, it's all part of the same discussion. And so that
Capacity is like the maximum number of students that can study at a school, not whether a room is being used for, special education or general education or music or something. Those
Yeah.
are, it's not splitting hairs. They like
well,
mean different things.
what I'm saying is that to me, it's part of, and to others, it's part of the conversation. You have to start with what is the capacity, okay, and then you can go to what is the utilization. And if you don't know what capacity is, then you can't evaluate the utilization. It's just, it's part of the same conversation.
So it sounds like, Mariah, this is going to be shared at the finance subcommittee on Wednesday and shared with the broader school committee on Thursday. Is that right?
I don't even think it's on the broader school committee
No?
agenda.
Okay.
I think it's because again, this idea of school committee should know about things before they go to other committees first. So it's going to finance on Wednesday.
Okay. So
So-
I think based on what you described, that probably gets you a large portion of the way there, Cliff, based on what you're looking for. At least is what I understood, based on what was discussed. So I guess I'm going to watch that subcommittee meeting because that's an input into some of the work that I've been thinking about on the future side, around the school model and sort of redistribution potentially of capacity across different buildings. And then maybe after that, there's questions coming out of that, Cliff. And that might save you a little bit of time. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, could I just interject something here? The three of you, Cliff, Sadaf, Mariah, have been talking about the K-8 schools. Cliff, are you looking at all into the size of classes or sections and teaching loads at the high school level?
So, I thought Mariah was going to be doing some work on the teaching requirements or assignments at the high school, the 4+1. And we understand that that's a collectively bargained thing. I otherwise am not looking at class size at the high school because I just don't think it's comparable. And I think that the way things are done in the high school doesn't really lend itself to the way the analysis can be done in the K-8s.
So what sort of information is going to emerge from the high school? Are we going to will we know, for example, that teacher A is teaching 4 classes of 25 kids, and teacher B has a section of 4 kids because kids haven't signed up, and a section of 8 kids, and doesn't have any other classes and has open time. Are we going to get that sort of information, Mariah?
No,
to what
that
level?
wasn't what was requested, and certainly
To what level? I mean, if we're thinking about the utilization of educators, what sort of information can we glean from the high school with respect to the high school?
So educators aren't hired on full-time basis. There's many educators who are hired as fractional, like FTEs. So I don't know if that helps you. Like there's not teachers who are getting paid at a 1.0 who have 2 classes, one with 4 kids and one with 8 kids in it. There's just a whole range of appointments at the high school depending on what people are actually doing. But
Is there any, I assume there's got to be, I mean, if we take the names out, I assume that there's got to be a record that indicates what individuals are hired as and what they're doing.
Sure. What do you mean by what they're doing though? Like hired as a special education teacher, hired as a science teacher, like hired at whatever their FTE is. Yes.
Hired at whatever FTE is, and how many classes they have, how many students they have. Do
I don't know that it would tell you exactly how many students they have. I think those are probably, like, I'm not sure that all of that is in a cross-reference table that would tell you not only their number of classes they have and the number of students. It might be more complicated than that. But I guess my question is, like, what would be the point of collecting that information? What is that going to tell you? Like
well,
if a teacher is teaching 4 kids and 8 kids, I'm making this up. They're at 0.4, they're teaching 4 kids and 8 kids. What would that tell you?
could those classes be combined? I don't, that's do we
The high
need
school is, well,
do
go ahead.
we I mean, the bottom line obviously is, do we need everybody there who is there, or don't we?
Right, and they reduced FTE this past year due to reduced enrollment already.
Okay,
Right.
I guess it'd be interesting to see the analysis behind that. It'd be useful.
I guess, Dick, the one thing that I'm not sure that analysis is going to help with is concluding that someone is underutilized and therefore you can sort of collapse sections. And that all goes into the way the scheduling works at the high school. So it's not as if the one, use an example of someone who's 4 kids and then 8 kids, they're not teaching those 2 things at the same time, so they can't be collapsed at the same time. And in the elementary schools, certainly K through 5, maybe 6, it's all the kids are with one teacher. Okay, so it's everything is done together. And then in middle school, it's homeroom, and there are 3 different major places that they go off to. The high school is it's just so different. I'm a little suspect that we can apply the same sort of logic to that analysis as we are going to do, or hope to do, at least with the elementary schools.
So I think that that's fair, and even just in looking at, because I was doing some thinking around this middle school model question, and I looked at all the different school websites and how many teachers are in each, teach for each grade, and so that complexity around the scheduling and how the teachers work does start in 6th grade, from what I gathered, and I agree with you. I think it's similarly or significantly more complex at Brookline High School. I think the
Yeah.
question that I still have related to, so there's the 4+1 question, which Mariah, you're already working on. The question I still have on that is whether there's incremental opportunity to increase class sizes, because our target range is somewhere in the 15 to 25 number from what I understand. And I think we're sort of
You're
at least
saying
based
at
on
the
some of
high
the
school or
average
in the elementary school?
at the high school, right? The top is 25 students but
The
I
top is
imagine there
taller than
ranges
20,
for
is
the
higher than
Yeah,
25.
it's more than that.
Yeah.
Is it really? Okay, so even better. But I think our average class size is actually quite a bit lower than that at BJS. So that's, despite the complexity, which I acknowledge is, therefore, you probably will not get sort of a fully optimized number to sort of the maximum target, which you probably don't want anyways, because you have to manage fluctuating enrollment. But there is a question, I think, that has been asked and that I have as well, around whether there continues to be an opportunity to increase class sizes within Brookline High School, um, just given what the average numbers say.
When we went through this 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was 3 falls ago at this point, there was a very large, there were many more students who came into the high school. We did not increase the number of FTEs, and we had multiple, particularly AP science classes that were in the low 30s to mid 30s in the classroom, more than they even had benches for the
Yeah.
labs. And so there was a tremendous issue with students not even being able to get into the class, even at those high levels of students, of
Enrollment.
seats in the classroom. And so the next year, we added on 7 FTE, which typically at the high school, it's about 12 to 15 students per FTE is the order of magnitude that they use for hiring. And so we added on 7. And that brought us last year, and as far as I know, and then that brought us back to where we wanted to be in terms of being able to staff for the students we had in the classes they have, and being able to offer sort of high level classes for the students who needed that, really being able to offer what the expectations are for the high school. Then this past year, we reduced their FTE because the prediction was they were dropping by 50 students. We reduced their FTE by, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4, but in that ballpark, again, on this 1 to 12 to 15 sort of approach. And so they lost FTE this past year. And there has been some concern this fall again about access to science classes. And again, I think the high school is really like, they're very attuned. The schedules, just so you know, don't come out until essentially the week before school starts, almost
Yeah.
maybe the 1 to 2 weeks before school starts, because the last week before school starts is what's called Arena Day, where you fix it. But these schedules are getting optimized all summer long to figure out all of this different staffing things that are going into this. 2 years ago, the high school also started, as we were figuring out how we could do this better, holding a pool of FTE so that they did not necessarily say we're going to have 14 FTE in science. They would say we're going to have 13. And then as we get into the very nitty gritty final bits of the schedules, we're going to allocate them exactly where we need them so that we can not over allocate in any area. So there's been a huge amount of work to really refine the scheduling. And as Cliff says, like, I always joke that you have to get a PhD from Hal Mason University, Hal being the assistant head of school who manages all of this because of the complexity of it. There's probably classes, I'm sure there's classes that are offered at the level of, maybe we'll say 4, particularly for special education classes. You could certainly have some sort of small group science classes or something like that. As you get up into very high level, for example, I don't know, maybe Japanese 5 or something like that. You might have a very small class that's taking that top level of that, or some drama classes that might be very small. As you get into very sort of, as you're completing the sequence, you might find that you are getting relatively small classes that allow students to complete the sequence. I'm sure we could go back again and say, what is your minimum and your maximum and your average for this year, and get an answer. And I'm just not sure that it would tell us anything, but we could, if that's what people want to know, I can ask. I want to make sure I'm clear on what the ask is so that I'm relaying the right information.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, and it is, I acknowledge up front that it was complex, and I don't underestimate that complexity, and I don't know obviously the ins and outs, and I don't have a PhD in that particular subject,
Nor do I.
or any subject for that matter. But I do think it is worthwhile to hear from the schools potentially. Here are the things that have been done. Here are the numbers. Here's why they look that way. And here's where we think there may be opportunity over time or not, or here's why we think we've sort of already optimized and this is what it is. That would be helpful. And that's sort of related to teaching loads, right? And classroom size sort of straddles both of those topics. I just don't want us to focus exclusively on the K through 5 when, that the same question potentially exists in junior high or middle school as well as high school, even though it's perhaps more complex to understand that. I'm not sure that means we don't ask the question. And that is my point that I wanted to make.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah,
About how many do we hire each year? I mean, you said you hit this target of 1 to 12 to 15. About how many new hires to replace existing or to increase?
I
Are
don't
we
have the
bringing,
information on replacing existing.
okay, but
Yeah. This year it was a reduction. It was a net reduction, and I don't know what the churn was among staff, the turnover.
okay. And I'm curious about the pool of FTEs. How, just going back to my experience in schools, in the Boston, on the Boston side, um, how can you allocate somebody to teach English versus a science? I mean, you'd have to.
They don't.
Okay.
They're in their
So you'd have a
course.
pool of teachers who are qualified to teach biology, qualified or qualified to teach science, and a pool um, certified to teach English, and hold them back, or
And what if you don't need them?
yeah.
So that's what I'm saying about they have the, like, I'm sure there's churn or whatever, but they have like, let's say there's 14 who they know they need, and then they'll plus up in small amounts. But it might be, I'll give you an example, 20 head count, it equals 14 FTE right now. And then you say to someone, hey, we actually need an extra class taught. Do you mind going from a 0.6 to a 0.8? And so then your FTE, your head count's still 20, but your FTE goes from 14 to 14.2. So does that help clarify how they work those issues?
I mean, that's one way of doing it, but um, is that the way it's done, or do you have educators who are not allocated to anything, and then they are. I understood you said high school holds a pool of FTEs, and I
Right. So
understood that.
again, say you say, okay, we've got, I'm making this up, 100 FTEs, and we are going to allocate 95 of them, 19 here, 19 there, math, science, etc. And then 5 FTEs we're holding. Now that's separate from the head count. And so we have a whole bunch of people who work for us, and some of them are 0.6s, and some of them are 0.8s, and some of them are 0.4s, and some of them, a lot of them are 1.0s. And then you say, okay, well, we realized we booked 19 here, and we had 17, and we need a little more. So we say to those 19 people or whatever, like, oh, let's add a little more here. So they have enough of the people who are lower in the fractional FTEs to be able to kick them up.
I think the confusion is head count versus FTE, and people
Yeah.
thinking they're the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so the bodies are there,
Correct.
is what you're saying.
Correct.
All right.
The
All right.
bodies are there, but they're being paid according to what they're actually working. And some of them, a lot of them are 1.0s, and there's people who are 0.6s, 0.8s, 0.4s. I think there's even some 0.2s. And the other thing to remember is that the deans and associate deans are all also, they're point data appointed, and the program directors are point data appointed and are teaching 0.2s as well, or have other duties as 0.2s. So they can teach classes, or they're like, there's a whole bunch of flex built into the system that isn't immediately obvious when you think about, maybe even like it was my high school experience, but other people's high school experiences. Like the high school is really very dynamic with what's going on and what's being offered.
How do you budget for that pool?
Budget for the pool of the entire pool, or budget for the pool of the specific, like the floaters that are left over?
Well, the floaters if you find out, the budget gets passed in May,
Yeah.
and then fiscal year starts and high school starts, and all of a sudden you need that, bodies from that pool, or portions of FTEs from that pool, but they haven't been really budgeted for. So how does that?
They
how does
have
that
been
work?
budgeted for, Cliff. We budget
So
for them as a pool, but they're budgeted at the average, like I want to say it's Masters 5 level at 87,000 or something like that. So there's a budgeted pool for them. Um, and it gets pulled, and that's when we do the position control report. We're actually like drawing down on the pool.
Okay, so we're going to be able to understand, because I know Susan did something like this in the spring, we're going to be able to understand in any fiscal year how much that buffer is being budgeted for. How much money is being budgeted for that buffer?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
I mean, so not that I want to necessarily take up their time, but would it, Mariah, in your opinion, would it be helpful if Hal or the headmaster, came and spoke to us, or even, Bob from the school committee, because he certainly has experience in this. Do you think that would be helpful? I have no idea. I'm asking you.
I think it could be what I know we had a presentation on this in the spring, and I think it might be valuable for me to ask Betsy to find the presentation for you to see it, rather than have them essentially give the same presentation twice, and then see if that sort of answers the questions, and if not, what questions are remaining.
That makes
That, that would be a starting point. I assume that there would be a PowerPoint, a slideshow, and maybe if there's a recording from the meeting that you could.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, there is.
Yeah, we always record them. So I just, and Betsy's amazing at finding the stuff. I know that they've presented to us and multiple times over the past couple of years as we've gone through the different iterations that I described earlier of needing to add, removing, etc. We've gone through it. So let me see what she can find and circulate that, and then you can see what other questions are out there.
Okay.
And I think Hal probably would be willing, but and he's really the machine that makes the scheduling happen.
That'd be great.
Okay.
All right, great. So that covers that topic. I assume there'll be follow-up questions, which I think is fine. On section in this document around the topics we're going to cover, 7G, one of the things I wanted to raise is we've been dealing with this potential middle school model question in the futures subcommittee, and I'm actually wondering, and Sergio had sort of mentioned this before as well, if it's just better for us to talk about it in this subcommittee. I'm not sure if people have a preference to streamline some of the conversation. I feel like there's a bunch of stuff that straddles the two, and my original thought was that we keep them separate around shorter term and longer term, but it might be more efficient to tackle it here. And I want to acknowledge I'm contradicting my prior statements on this. But the more I think about this, it's probably easier to tackle it here, and wanted to see if anybody had any concerns about that.
If we do, then I think it's important that we think about it in the context of a long-term project,
Yep.
and not in the context of something that's going to happen in the next year and a half or two.
Of course, yes. Yes, I fully acknowledge that. There is no way that is happening in the next.
You don't think we're going to solve this in the next month and a half, Cliff?
No. Well, maybe. I mean, I think it's a fascinating thing for the town to look at, and regardless of what the conclusions are, I think it would provide a lot of information. One of the things that came up at the futures discussion last week, was that we need to be thinking long term in terms of what's best for the town. And it's very hard when people are in the moment managing over a year to 2-year period for them to simultaneously be actually thinking about long term and whether or not an investment that leads to change that is better financially is something that should be evaluated and potentially embraced. And I think that's a problem with our government generally. It's very short-term focused, and this is an opportunity to recommend something, that be done to look at things for 10, 15, 20, 25 years from now, or over that course. and not have a preconceived notion of what it's going to mean, because nothing will ever change if we think of things that way.
Right. So unless people have a concern about potentially moving it here, I'm gonna just chat with Sergio and then potentially move it to the subcommittee. And I think it might help streamline, at least for me.
I
And
really like what you're saying about having sort of like, well, at least what I understood you were saying about having short term versus long term, because I think that it's really important, as Cliff is saying, to not lose sight of the long term. But I also think that, like, for clarity to the public and everybody else, like, understanding that the long-term things are not going to be sorted out for May, but we really want to keep our eyes on them is really important so that people understand how these two things play into that next year, 10 years from now, 25 years from now, as Cliff said.
yeah.
Could I? Okay. Just very quickly, can you remind me, the budget gets presented on December 3rd to the school committee? Is that my understanding?
We're going to see bottom line numbers this week.
This week?
Yep,
Okay.
Thursday. And then we're going to get more detail on the 3rd.
Okay. And Dr. Schmuckler is working on special ed and tiers and so forth. Have we
She
heard
doesn't
when,
work on it. Well, she sort of works on MTSS, but
have we heard when that is there something that's going to emerge from that or not?
do you mean in their budget presentations or
There was an original, I think actually, Dick, what you're referencing, and I had sort of, had fallen off my radar, but Bella had mentioned maybe a couple months ago that Dr. Schmuckler was going to share some updates on special education, and then it would happen in early November, which,
Yeah.
kind of now. And that, so I had actually been expecting it in last week's meeting. And obviously last week's meeting was long and there were some things that we didn't get to regardless. We being you guys during that session, but it was shared with this group by Bella that there was going to be a presentation related to special education more broadly that would also address some of the questions that had been raised in the audit, because that was something that came up over the summer with the broader committee. Dick, is that what you were?
Yeah, and I had just made a mental note. I don't recall there being any specific date as a commitment, and I was just curious as to.
Yeah, I thought it was the 13th, and this gets back to
You thought it was the 13th? Okay.
this gets back to the something that oh God, was written this summer, talking about the state rules in terms of professionals for special education classes and what
The
their
DESE, yeah, the DESE
teaching
standards.
load should be, and that we essentially don't have classes that are at the recommended sizes, and so therefore there was an opportunity to increase the load for some professionals, and that might lead to fewer positions. And I thought that was going to be part of the topic of the conversation that we were expecting from Dr. Schmuckler.
I would imagine that any of that will come out in December 3rd once they give us the next line of figures. In terms of the other presentation, it vaguely rings a bell with me, but she's had to take some time to deal with a personal thing, so it might be that there's a couple week delay relating to that.
Okay.
She
But
being Dr. Schmuckler?
Yes, yep, exactly.
So is that something that you can ask about, Mariah?
Is
Or
that something I
right
can
now?
ask about the
The special education,
question or about the presentation?
the presentation.
Val is telling me that the presentation was about disproportionality in special education in response to DESE, which is not relating to disproportionality is not about staffing. That's about
Yeah.
which students get put into special
Yeah.
education.
I see. Interesting. Okay.
And again, I would imagine that any conversation about staffing levels will happen as part of the December 3rd and subsequent meetings relating to budgeting.
Okay. So we'll wait to discuss that then.
You know, this pushes a lot
Right.
kind of back past December 3rd, December 8th, the week of, whenever. Um, I don't know where that leads.
Yeah, so I thank you for raising that, Dick. I was going to raise this as well. I know that in the future subcommittee as well, we had been speaking about this, that there was a concern about meeting the original target timeline. So the original was that we would go to the select board with a recommendation in mid-December that was more solidified, which we know is not realistic. And then the revised was that there would be something more tentative in December, and then we would target a more formal recommendation and a report by end of January. And I wanted to just check that with this group. I know that in the futures conversation, based on just capacity and the various constraints that everybody is contending with, that was going to be difficult, at least for some of the work that I was tackling. And so I was going to raise this more broadly at the full committee meeting on Thursday, but just wanted to gauge from this group, if people have similar concerns. And we can discuss it as a full committee, but wanted to give this group a heads up that I will be raising it on Thursday for discussion on, do we want to shift the timeline around? Do we want to look at delaying the full report? What might that mean for the work that the group does, or what does the work timeline mean for the ultimate report and recommendation as well, and what are the options? So interested in feedback.
To me, a lot of
Uh,
the work of this group, I mean, there's these questions, but there's really the sanity check component of the budget and having this group's input on what you think about certain aspects and so forth. And to the extent that that will be iterative and might take, and then you think there's going to be the presentation on December 3rd. Another update is that Bella cannot come on December 8th. She has a conflict. She can come on December 15th. I haven't heard back yet from Susan on her availability on those days, I don't think. So that is challenging again, just in terms of timeline. And I just
yeah,
think that to be able to complete that work to the satisfaction of this group probably will require more time to do
Yeah.
that.
Okay. So that's helpful. So there's sort of a tactical question about whether there's something else the week of the 8th that Bella can do. They don't have to delay it a full week. I don't know if that's an option, but I would prefer to try to find a different time that week than delay a full week to the 15th, because the 15th will be the last meeting. I think realistically we'll have, actually maybe not, maybe we'll be able to do the 22nd. Um, I have to actually, no, actually I can't do the 22nd. I think a lot of people will be that week.
I
So
think that's going to be a difficult week for a lot
that's a
of
tough
people.
week. That's right. I was losing track of when Christmas hit. But so I think going back to my prior statement, I do think the 15th will be the last meeting we have until the new year. Um, in which case I'd love to try to get a different day the week of the 8th. So I don't know, Mariah, if it's maybe what we do is I can ask Nicole to send out a doodle for that week to try to
Can I
find a
make a
different.
suggestion? Let's find
Yeah,
out when Bella's available rather than a doodle.
that works too.
Okay.
I'll ask Nicole to do that.
Yeah, do we have now uh, a meeting of this subcommittee on the 15th of December? Okay, at 5.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on the calendar, but we had talked about every Monday. Yeah, I don't see it on the calendar,
Yeah,
but it is scheduled
we
through
had
the
through the
15th.
8th, I think. So
Yeah,
I just wanted to confirm. I mean, there's nothing I'd rather do on Monday the 15th. So
of course. Um, regardless, I will have Nicole send out a meeting for the 15th, and get a different time for the week of the 8th.
Okay.
All right. So let's just get back to, I want to run through the other sections. So we talked about Cliff, your section, so that was 7 and 8. I'm going to go back to the beep section. Jeff, did you want to provide an update on where you are, if there's anything that you need?
Yeah, I do. So I did. Well, I'll make the TLDR that I am going to ask Mariah for some information based on a list of questions that I've been putting together, but I'm not quite ready to do that yet. I have over the weekend took a little bit of time to integrate a couple different docs. So the ones that Mariah had pointed us to, the one that Cliff pointed me to, that was a presentation from a couple years ago, and trying to just stitch them together and figure out a couple of pieces. There was definitely a little bit of inconsistency in some of the numbers. I pulled them into Excel and some of them added up the way you thought they would, and then some didn't. And so I was just trying to figure out the discrepancies. I have a list of questions that I'll pass over, and then the only other sort of takeaway is it does at first blush seem like from the original prediction of what we were going to need to charge for beep when we switch to full day, that the actual numbers are lower than that. Now, what I'm trying to figure out is, was the prediction off, or are we not asking enough? And that part I haven't gotten to yet. So there seemed to the part two is also that there was a note that said after the FY25 adjustment that we'll need to be raising tuition, 4 to 5% based on staffing. But then, like immediately below that, it showed the numbers only going up by like 2%. So I couldn't figure out what the discrepancy was there. So, at any rate, in short summary, I have some questions. I need to put them together in a way that's useful and send
Jeff,
them on.
when you send them over, I know you would do this anyway, but just to make sure, will you like cite where different
Yes,
things come from? Thank
100%.
you. Because
Yeah, yeah.
otherwise, yeah.
Otherwise, you got to go dig through it all, and I
Exactly.
already
And I'm
just did
like,
all
where
that
did
work.
this come from? And
Yes,
then I see it, I'm like,
exactly.
oh, I know what was going on.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
not.
I'm sure some of them you'll just know,
Yeah.
right? And anyway, so yeah, that's where I am with that, and I'm looking to continue that, and I just need a little more time.
So the other thing I was, you use the term full day. And when I went back and looked at the information after having had a conversation with Mariah about something, there's the historic beep, which went from like 8:30 to 12:30. And then what I've always been talking about was the extension from 12:30 to 2:30.
Right,
And then I gathered there's something that extends even past that,
right, right,
which is full day. And so
No,
I
full
just want
day
to make
is
sure.
till 2:30. You're talking about extended day, which goes
right.
past that. Yep.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we use the right terminology when we're
Yeah,
looking at.
yeah. That's what I was thinking as well. What Mariah said, because I always think of extended day as extended day, like PSED, or in this case, beep
Sure.
extended day. So,
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
So
sure.
extended day for beep goes until 5:30 or
Yeah, it's like, I can't
later?
remember if it's 5:30 or 5:45, but in that ballpark.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So Jeff, is it viable for you to present next week? Sort of
Yeah,
share
I
with.
should be able to present next week because I think this weekend is pretty
Jeff, just do me a
not
favor
exciting.
and like send
Yeah,
me the questions ASAP and harass me because
yeah. No problem.
Look at that. Look at that, Sadaf. You
I've
That's
gotten
You
right.
got
All
a,
you have
a
to do
name
is
and a
assign
date.
it and
exercise
Yeah.
the gears start to go.
you've exercised that power in your hands.
That's right. That's right. I was being too nice, apparently, but
There you go.
Absolutely.
There you
yeah,
go. How does it
now.
feel?
How does it
It
feel?
was good. It was good. So, Cliff, do you want to, do you think you'll be in a position to share on the 24th? Um, I might be depending on, the next topic of our conversation, but I know, Cliff, where you feel like you're going to be. I know that you're tracking to, town meeting as well. So I don't know if you need till the 1st.
Yeah. So I think it depends on, let's see what happens on Thursday or Wednesday,
Okay.
Wednesday with the presentation, and whether or not I feel I can put something together that's coherent.
Yep.
If I can, I'm happy to. So like I
Okay.
can't answer the question right now.
Yeah, that's fair. I get it. Okay. So moving on, the next items were 10 and 11. I know I had sent some questions, Mariah, to you. And so I'm waiting to have you either get those questions answered or have a conversation um, with the PSB team. So just wanted to check in on that. And if I can have that this week, then I can probably present something next week. Um, but that's, sort of contingent on
So,
people's availability.
So your two questions were about Dr. Schmuckler
Yeah.
and um, she, I believe, is going to be back. Um, it's either today or tomorrow or Wednesday. It's the first half of this week.
I see.
Um,
Okay.
and so I think the questions you wrote, I can send a note introducing the two of you and asking for her to make that time. I'll half write the email right now so that I don't forget to write it later on.
Yep, that's fair. So I think
And then the
realistically, if
second one was about the operations question and about parking spaces, et
and yeah,
cetera.
other
I
space
thought I
rental.
had shared the rental rates before, but I'll share them again. But I guess your question is, are they market rate? Is that the,
Yeah, I mean, the question is, are we renting out spots? Could we rent out spots? You had made a point in a
but it
different
is about
conversation.
parking spots, or your third question was about rentals in general? The first two were
The
about parking
question,
spots.
the first one is about parking spots, and then the
Mhm.
rest is about rentals in general. Is there additional
I see.
opportunity for
Okay.
rentals? Are we maximizing what could we rent out, inclusive of parking spots? And then the second question is, are the rates, are we charging as much as we could, given what the market would support?
Right. And just so people know, when Sadaf and I spoke about parking spots, one of the first things that had come up when I mentioned that to someone was, but teachers, a lot of them are getting to school quite early in the morning. So the parking spots would have to be essentially like you have to get out by 7 in the morning, let's say, like at the worst case. Um, so I suppose we could look into that.
Maybe
Yeah, and I think
maybe
it depends.
Do people want to rent spots that they have to get out by 7 a.m. for?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, just and what I shared with Mariah, so I'll share this with the full group, is that on my street, this is a Lawrence teacher staff parking zone. And yes, there is one person who's here at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I know who that is personally. But the other will park much closer to 8, in my observation. And then if people need to be out by 7:30, that is actually a viable, a sort of a reasonable time, I think, for, given people's commutes, depending on where they're commuting to, 7:30 or 8 o'clock. So it depends. I think there's a question about how many of those spots, maybe a third of those actually get taken up before 7.
Yeah.
But certainly not all of them.
Sadaf, what do you think about in the group? What do you think about me saying to staff when they're presenting their revenue opportunities to just include their analysis of parking revenue in
Yes,
that
I think that's
work? Like
great.
with that sort of, rather than having a question and answer thing, like
I think
please
that totally
explicitly
works.
address them.
So it's the
Okay.
parking opportunities and then other rentals and whether that's market rate or not. I mean, if you can answer the questions within the overall revenue opportunity conversation, I think that's great. And then,
Okay. Yeah, I think that might be easier just from their workflow. Like they
yeah,
can just slot that in if that's
yeah,
okay.
totally. That's
Okay,
that's that
great.
works.
Um, I had some other updates when it's time. I just want to make sure I get the chance to report on mine.
Yep. Okay. So then I'll wait till when Dr. Schmuckler's back. I'll set up time with her. So I probably would need 2 weeks before I could share anything. So probably the week of the 24th, realistically. But we'll sort of wait to hear, when she's back, maybe digging herself out of the backlog since she's been out. All right. So the next one, Mariah, was zero-based budgeting. And then we can move on to any other topics you have.
Zero base is going to take a while because I have the framework already built, but until I see what they're presenting, it doesn't make sense to like, it's going to be a later thing. The other things I wanted to talk about was there was, I think, 4 questions that I was supposed to find out about. Um, and so, well, there was the timing question that we've talked about. And then Cliff would like to understand the enrollment methodology. I think, Cliff, you got the answers. You just need their coefficients for the years, right? We agreed on? If you're talking, I can't hear
Yeah,
you.
yes, and
Okay.
I'm not sure that, well, I'm not sure that about back testing. The question is whether or not they've used this methodology the past 3 or 4 years, and what it would have said to them versus what actually happened. That's not clear from the presentation she made. But in terms of moving forward, it's a fairly simplistic methodology, and so I'm not sure there's a lot of back testing to do.
So, she said it was a new methodology she was using this year, going back to the 3-year cohort survival rate. We used to use 5 years, but she chose, I think she said this in the presentation, she used 3 years because she doesn't want to get it tangled up in COVID data. And in prior years, she just moved the cohorts directly through at a 1.0 coefficient.
1.0, really?
Yeah, yep. She just went and I think prior years, I'd have to recall, but it's pretty obvious. Like basically she moved kindergarten ahead at a 1 year, like the prior year, they just moved it ahead. So if there was 400 kids in kindergarten this year, they assumed 400 for last year, and then they were moving them ahead at 100 or a 1.0 coefficient. Was at least for a couple, like we had Cropper in 2023, they used the Cropper number. 2024, she used the 1.0 roll kindergarten ahead, and now she's using, in fall 2025, she's using the um, 3-year survival at 3-year average of kindergarten.
Okay, so what she's doing this year doesn't compare to what she's done in
Correct,
prior years.
correct. But in theory, you could back test base
Yeah,
if you want.
if you have all the data,
If you have all the data, which we do have all the data, so in theory, we could, because we get the data of every year, we could calculate survival rates. But again, as you go back in time, your number of years for your cohort survival is going to get reduced because you're going to start getting tangled in bad COVID data,
Yeah, I
or I'll
think
say unusual COVID data.
well, I think you should absolutely uh, start from a date after COVID was over, if you will. But yeah, well, if you have all those numbers, just pass them on. So that's fairly straightforward math to
Okay.
do.
Did we
Um,
just this? I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, and please tell me if it's a more complicated answer. Did we see an impact this year of the limitations on visas? And yeah, I would suspect it may have been concentrated at Baker,
hmm.
if anywhere.
So the answer is that that question was asked on Thursday, and Megan Gainey, who's the enrollment coordinator, said that they didn't particularly see it one way or the other.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I will say though, like obviously there's fewer postdocs and like sort of higher level postdocs and fellows than there are graduate students, and they are maybe coming through in different categories of visas. Certainly there's an overall graduate student and higher education dip, but it might just be that there just wasn't enough students for it to be particularly impactful. On the other hand, um, there was a much smaller kindergarten cohort than they expected. I think it was about 40 students lower than they expected. So that could be where we were seeing some of it, because often the families that are coming in are willing to bring their kids for the youngest grades, but not for later grades. So, but
Yeah.
they said there was not like strong evidence either way.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. The other thing I was going to report on was the committee asked about the question of what makes PSB competitive against other communities. They are going to ask HR for that relevant exit interview data for both former employees and for prospective employees. I haven't gotten that back yet, but that is on their radar, and yes. The third question was connecting sit-off with Karen, yes. And then we had a conversation about the data that you presented, Dick, on the 28,000 average per student, or whatever it is, mid-20s per student. Um, and the net cost. And it was a very interesting conversation around this back. And I don't know if I'll do it. I didn't have enough time to actually like write it down or present a graphic, but I'll try and verbalize the response to this and see if it's clear enough, which was in the same way that Gen Ed has um, a step function with a relatively low marginal cost per student. You could say almost zero, but not. Special education, with some exceptions, does as well. And I'll just give two examples of where there is very low marginal cost and then one where there is a true marginal cost. And so, for example, say you have a RISE classroom and it has 7 students in it. Adding an 8th student has almost no marginal cost because you've already set up the classroom, you have the teachers who are in there, you have the paras who are in there, you have the structure. Adding that 8th student doesn't add cost. In the same way, you think about, well, there's a cohort of students who need speech language services. And so you hire the speech language educator and their schedule is filled and they are running groups. There is no difference in running a group that has 2 kids in it versus 3 kids. And you might even say, well, there's no difference if we're hiring this educator at 1.0. But I still think if you think about it more as like the time they're spending, most of which, not all of which, but a lot of which is in small group settings for some of these. Again, there is no incremental cost if the group has 2 kids versus 3 or 3 versus 4, so on. So there's essentially quite a large step function. The exception to this is for students who require a dedicated or a shared aid. And then you would say certainly there's quite a large marginal cost to their participation in the schools. And notably, if you recall, Dick, when I sent over the application to that PSB had filed for the METCO special education assistance, the cost that was in there that was requested was for 3 one-to-one aides. So there certainly is a cost and that is there. But the conversation back from staff was there a couple things, but primarily there's just not 4 million in savings because we don't actually accrue those savings if we didn't have those students because those programs are already running, those groups are already running, et cetera. Was that a clear explanation? I hope it came through okay.
No, I understand the idea of marginal cost. I think the one or maybe an issue here is that you're not just adding one student and talking about the marginal cost of adding one student, but the non-resident students are fully about 1/7 of our total number of special education students. So I'm not sure that you can say it's a no cost situation when you're in that with those numbers.
But with 140 students spread across 10 buildings or 9 buildings, we'll say, because they are not in BEEP, 9 schools. Say you have 10 or 12 kids per school, and some of them are using OT services, and some of them are using speech, and some of them are using Learning Center. It's not like all of these kids, all 12 or 15 at that school, have the same service provider they're going to. Like IEPs are very diverse in terms of what they're actually including. And so it's not like you could say, oh, well, if I had 15% less students, I could remove 2 of my FTE because the reality is a school might only have, I'm making this up, but we'll say 2 speech language providers for the entire school, right? So there's not like the fraction that we're talking about is probably not as because the services aren't homogenous, the ability to reduce from those services is much less than you might think based on the numbers.
Okay.
And again, that's not to say that there's, zero cost, but again, that like there's probably many fewer places where a wholesale reduction in students would actually result in a reduction of costs.
Yeah, no, I think it is probably fair to say that the marginal cost, at least the short run marginal cost, is not the same as the average cost. But I don't know, as you go longer term, you don't know. And I think to answer the question, um, I don't know, are they digging into the details of the services provided?
Oh yeah, that's reviewed every single year and mapped
No,
against
but
staffing.
I mean, if we're talking about what is the level of services for the non-resident students, are we looking at that or not looking at that?
We meaning us?
Yeah,
Or we,
the PSB,
well, we were provided with a chart that showed three different levels they had,
right?
and you could see the different levels of services that were provided, right?
So if somebody is full inclusion, does that mean no aid at all, or could they have an aid?
Almost certainly they probably don't have an aide in that situation because aides are pretty far. That means that it's a student who, for example, and I don't want to like generalize too much, but let's say it's a student who participates in a regular classroom but might get pulled out for additional reading support or speech language support or something like that. But they essentially are primarily all day in a general education classroom.
Um,
So those were my questions that I think I was supposed to answer. And that's where I got to for, I'm making progress on all of them.
yes, thank you for moving everything along.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
A lot going on. All right, good. So there was one thing that was raised in the future subcommittee that I wanted to bring here, that Val had raised around state aid as a lever. Cliff, I know you were there as well. I wrote down a sort of a brief note, and I wanted to just call that out here and determine whether, talk about what we do with it. To be honest, I'm not quite sure it's an important call out in terms of state aid and our ability to secure state aid. I'm not, this is not something I'm familiar enough with to really understand what we would do to unpack this. Cliff, do you remember this coming up with the futures?
Well, Val is here. We can ask her to to tell us what she said.
We
She's
can.
not,
I don't think Val is ready to talk.
Yeah.
okay.
She's in listening mode only.
I, the only thing I remember, and I could be misremembering because we've had the conversation in other venues, is using some sort of campaign with our state representatives. And I was thinking that we should get, sort of a coalition, if you will, other municipalities to try to come up with an approach to the legislature and the governor about how we get more funding. In particular, I thought the conversation was really centered around non-resident students and NetGo, and that's where we would go to try to get some additional help. Now, there was an email circulated this afternoon from, I guess it was from Sergio, that was from the chair of the Brookline Education Union, the EU, that talks about a petition that is being signed by the unions, different towns, as well as school committees and staff members, and that's something that they asked us to take a look at and maybe sign on to. It's certainly something that we should consider. But in general, trying to find an appropriate way to lobby. And I think we should talk to Tommy about it. I think he might tell us it's a waste of time, or he might, have some suggestions about how to go about doing it. But that's about all I recall talking about.
Okay,
Val
that was
says
sort of my.
she said it was state and federal, not just state.
but similarly about sort of lobbying for more aid
Yeah.
from a legislative standpoint.
Yeah. I
I don't know if any of
I don't
you,
have much hope for federal.
did you read the article that I asked Nicole to share with everyone? There was
I
two
did.
of them, and one was from the MMA. I don't know if everyone saw that
Yeah.
MMA report. So I wanted to make sure everyone in the committee had. But the second one was, I think, the Atlantic, and it was essentially about how the federal government committed when it had IDEA to fund 40% of costs and has never gotten anywhere near that. Now, if I think our lobbying is only partially effective at the state level, I think it's even less so at the federal level, but it doesn't mean it should go unremarked, I guess.
Yeah.
Just following up on your comments about marginal cost, it it would be useful to attach a cost. I mean, you say that where kids are um, included in the classrooms, there's minimal cost or not a great marginal cost. Uh, where kids are in district but substantially separate, it would be probably useful to attach a cost to that and say, look, here are some real costs that are are being carried uh, for non-resident students, and um, to attach the marginal costs to the different categories of students or individual students, if only for the purposes of this lobbying,
I
rather
think
than
that there's enough,
rather than
well,
say, we can't do that.
I think though that you've articulated an average cost, which
Right.
can still be used for the purpose you described without actually, because the fact is that the marginal cost is still close to zero, except for those students that we know have specific needs that do accrue a specific individual cost.
Yeah. And if the response is, well, if you're talking about average cost, and that's not true of all of them, then it would be appropriate to know the real costs under the methodology that you described. So,
But that would presume that I agree that those things are not the same thing, that I'm willing to say it's zero sometimes and not zero other times. And I wouldn't do that because that's not the case.
okay.
Like if I think the marginal cost is zero, I wouldn't say to the federal government or the state government, they actually cost some other amount.
Right. But
So
but what I understood you to be saying is that for some of the kids, the cost is zero or close to zero. For other kids, that's not true.
that's
And
right, but it's not being in a sub-separate program that makes it not true. It's specifically students who have individual things on their IEP that are for them and them only.
and can we identify those costs?
Well, I think I just gave an example of the three paras that were put on that were requested for the Metco grant. I think that
Okay.
there's very few costs that we're talking about, but that would be one that I would identify as being a very clear and obvious cost that's for a specific student.
And what do you do with materials fee students who are in the same category?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you have these separate costs that you're actually applying to Betgo to cover. Are
There's no
there
funding source for materials fee and Metco. We didn't get the Metco grant last year. So even though we're applying for it, we're not getting it.
okay? So back to Dick's question.
Yeah.
You know, he's asking whether or not you can confidentially identify what those costs are, the sum of those individual costs.
And that's what I'm saying. I think I'm saying that I'm pretty sure that essentially the only costs that we're talking about are like
are those three.
one-to-one aids. I mean,
Well,
I could think of like, I'm trying to think of some examples. There might be like an iPad for a kid who's nonverbal and uses it as a device, but that's like a rounding error on a rounding error for
okay, okay.
$500 or $300 for an iPad. Like,
So let's ask the question differently.
Okay.
how many non-resident kids have one-to-one aides?
Yeah,
That's
so
essentially
that,
the question.
right, and I think my guess is that the answer, at least for Metco, is 3 based on the fact that the grant asked that, but we could confirm it.
And materials fee.
I think we need to be very careful on, as you say, like calling out things that might
I-
identify people, but we
I
could ask the
understand.
question. Yeah.
I understand. I mean, we don't need to know the number of kids. It's sort of like just what's the sum of the cost of those.
Mm.
Yeah,
That's the question.
there also are not just one-to-one, but there are 1 to 2, if you
I
have a
said
couple
shared
of
aids.
kids.
Yes. I
Yeah,
said shared
yeah.
aids, right?
I mean, and those are real costs also. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know but they're not, uh, it's not an absence of cost. So
Okay. So it sounds like that's to the extent that we can get that information, Mariah, that would be helpful to understand what the size of that one-to-one, one-to-two, sort of specific targeted
Mm-hmm.
support resources would be. All right, great. So I think we're 6:22. I was hoping to wrap up the meeting. I had one final question for the group, which is that we had talked about ex officio members before. There was one person I was working with on some of my efforts, and I wanted to know if people would feel comfortable inviting some additional ex officio members to the committee meeting, especially when we start asking questions about the budget. I thought it might be useful to include the individual who I was collaborating with. Um, I wanted to open it up to this group, and I'm happy to circulate.
When you say ex officio, do you mean literally what ex officio means, or do you mean someone who's not appointed to the committee?
Someone who's not appointed to the committee, who wouldn't be voting, but has been working with me on one of the areas that I own.
But do they have an appointment that would make them an ex officio person in some other context?
They don't have an appointment, so I'm using that term loosely as
so
someone who's not been
what you're asking, Mariah, generally an ex officio member is somebody who is a member of a committee because of another position they have. Like, because I am the chair of a board of trustees, I am an ex officio member of the finance committee and the investment committee and so forth.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're suggesting that, Sadaf,
No,
that
I'm
that
suggesting.
this is not a member of the school
Well,
committee.
who is
but
it
is
and what are
select-
they talking about? Like, what's
Yeah, so we had talked in some of the we had talked earlier about having, if there are people who are willing to help do some analysis and work with us, that people were, and Mariah, this might have been before.
No, I remember this. I'm just trying, like, who
So
are
it would
they and why would they come to the committee? What's their
So
background or the topic that would bring them to the
yeah,
committee?
I thought it might be easier to collaborate with them by including them in the conversation. I'm happy to send their profile around. I don't want to, and
I
then
mean,
we.
is it fair? I mean, it's Sadaf, would they really be any different from bringing in somebody who had just as a member of the public who has expertise in some of the areas we're looking at to assist this committee, rather than
That
saying
that was the idea.
yeah,
Yeah.
rather than saying they become an ex officio member of the
Yeah,
committee.
take that label off the table because I clearly misunderstood what that meant.
So they're
I'm happy to call them something else, but
they're outside experts.
an outside person who's done, follows the schools pretty closely and was, somebody who I have talked to about this topic and was helping me think through some of the things on
I'm
on
I'm not uncomfortable with that.
No, and I don't like, I guess to me it's a nice thing. I'm just trying to understand that is it like bad that we would say who they are in public now?
I just hadn't I just wasn't sure if I would feel comfortable.
Maybe
I was trying
maybe she hasn't asked them yet.
No, I have asked them. I have asked them. So this individual's I can send around his LinkedIn. His name is Sid. And he's just been somebody who's involved in some
We're talking
other
about Sid Srivastava?
yes.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
He's so
And he's
analytical.
very
He's
yes,
awesome.
that's right. And this is why I thought he would be a good addition.
Yeah.
And he's a Lauren parent.
He's like a hardcore, well, I don't know if he called himself a data scientist, but he's someone who knows statistics
I
and how
mean,
to
I think
present math
technically
and
he's a
whatever.
doctor, but yes, he very, very much the details is why I kind of recruited him to
Yeah,
help out. So people, well, it sounds like you know him, which is great. So that's a good vote of confidence.
yeah,
Um, so I just wanted to make sure that I
yeah.
made sure it's okay with you guys.
But what would he talk about? I still want to know what he wants to talk about.
Yeah, I think so. So the areas that I'm working on, I thought it would be helpful to just have an extra set of hands to help with some of the analysis. So he and I have been going back and forth on some of the things that I had been thinking about. And I thought it might be easier to just start including him in the meetings if that's okay, especially as we start getting more into some of the reviewing analysis people are doing, as well as hearing on the budget work from the schools. So probably in the next couple weeks, invite him to meetings if he can make this time. I haven't actually confirmed this time yet.
Great. I'm in favor.
Okay.
But I agree, it's sort of like Dick said, it's like a member of the public who's
It is
joining us
he is a
and
member.
opining, and that's
Yep.
fine. Like,
Yep.
that's all good.
Okay. All right, good.
I wish more members of the public came to
I
see
think,
the
do you?
scintillating work that we're doing.
Yeah, what you really wish is more members of the public came and also did the work.
That's right.
That's right.
A
So,
member of the public who will do work is a special, special person.
that's right. So Sid is one of those people, and I think he would actually be a really good addition to the conversation. Like you said, very analytical, and I also wanted to just, respect the wishes of the subcommittee. So,
Yeah,
all right.
I would say the only other thing to think about is we haven't normally done a public comment section for our subcommittees. And so it would just be something to think of if someone was coming and speaking, which I'm all for, are we allowing other people to speak? And if so, how do we want to, orchestrate that and all that kind of stuff? So just nuts and bolts wise, I'll just throw that part out there.
Yeah, so I don't know what the rules would be around it. It would not be sort of it wouldn't be an official public comment. I think it would be, somebody who is dug into a lot of the numbers on the schools and would be kind of an extra set of hands and brain.
Yeah,
I would, sorry,
we're,
go ahead.
I don't know that if somebody came to this committee and said, I've really got these facts and this data that I want to present, I don't think this committee or this subcommittee would say, sorry, we don't want to hear from you. So
Yeah, I think that's fair.
With
So
that said,
Discussion
Whether-
versus presentation.
whether it's a formal public comment period or not.
Right.
With
Well,
that said,
and-
Sadaf, you might want to, or one of us, but you, maybe that you're our chair, raise this question of when is the overall committee going to take public comment as well? Like, should we be doing this at our meetings at some sort of point, some sort of public hearing on our report? Or is there going to be a sort of like final report hearing from the committee? Because it is important to ensure that the public has the chance to reach the committee, whether or not you're doing it along the way. And I do think that there's often a perception that if you don't have public comment on your agenda and then all of a sudden people are coming to talk, then it's almost like it's a rigged game as to who gets to talk. So,
yep, that's fair.
Right.
Yeah.
Chaz has mentioned that he has public comment planned, and I actually think on the commit, I thought it was actually for the next committee meeting where I think some of the union reps wanted to come attend and ask some questions. I don't know if that's going to be fruitful or not, or if he's planning that for the December meeting when there's more clarity on what's happening. But he has that in mind, and then there would be additional public comment probably in the February timeframe, depending on.
Yeah, there was a mention, I thought, of not just public comment, but a formal public hearing.
Yes,
That's right.
good.
Sometime after the first of the year, I believe, but I may be.
And before the select board has to make a final determination on what goes on the ballot, which is obviously.
Well, but the select board will definitely have a public hearing. It's more like this body,
Yeah,
not necessarily the
I'm-
subcommittee, but like, sort of in the lead up to the report too. But it
Yeah.
sounds like Chaz already has it on his mind and that's good.
It's definitely on his radar. I'm not sure of the date. I can certainly ask. But it was, in the next, there's sort of two meetings planned. There's one for this week, and then there was one in early December. So it was going to be one of them.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
We will
All right, guys.
on
Thank
Thursday.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a
Thanks so
great
much.
night.
Bye.
See ya.